Well, we are live. Good morning from China. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to another of my takes on China with the my famous Swiss guy and the great shirt guy, Harald, in China.
What an introduction.
Let,
Yeah,
let's.
I'm all birds today, birds and flowers. No, I think it's mostly
Yeah,
birds.
the last time you came on, you had a wonderful silk Chinese shirt, and it was very beautiful.
What was it to make it
You,
visible? Yeah, I love these. They're called hanfu in Chinese, the
yeah.
traditional inspired. They're not really traditional, but traditional inspired kind of clothing. And they're very comfortable and they look nice and I like them.
I've just come back from Beijing. We had 4 days in the cold up there, and almost every place I went, the Forbidden City, the Temple of Heaven, the Summer Palace, all the places, there were a bunch of people dressed in hanfu, mostly pretty girls. Well, actually, they may not be pretty, but they look pretty. That's the important thing. They look really fantastic. So it's
Right, I
great to
cannot
see them.
help you with that. Sorry, I know
Yeah.
that will give you more views than some old dudes talking, but
True, true. I've got some pictures, and I'm going to put together a little bit of a video on this, but maybe for the TikTok audience rather than the Douyin TikTok audience rather than the YouTube audience. But we're going to talk very briefly about TikTok before we get started, because the
yes.
18th, which is a couple of days' time, there is a court decision. And you have put, and I'm going to bring it onto the stage, some information. I'm sorry about the size of this picture. This is the biggest I can make it. I have a
Okay.
problem on
Yeah.
my computer. This is your
Anyway,
Xiao Hongshu. Tell us about
right.
that.
The red note. So yeah, we're kind of burying the lead in this story. What's the big story? I think it started like yesterday or 2 days ago that some must have been huge TikTok influencers, like the American original non-Chinese version TikTok influencers, as a form of protest to go against the US government banning TikTok, suggested let's all download the Chinese original Xiaohongshu. In English, it's called Red Note. What Xiaohongshu means literally is the little red book, and indeed, exactly like Mao's little red book. So its title, its name is inspired by that. And I think that helped in terms of being a form of protest and trolling the US government, that it has this very Maoist name to it. It's a very harmless app, though. I mean, it's not like communist propaganda app. It's like any social media in China. There's all kinds of people there. If you go on Twitter, you find a lot of screenshots of Chinese bodybuilders and handsome guys that are fawned over by female American
Thousands of
users.
females.
Yeah, I mean, but overall, it's a very, very fun moment in history, and it's a very interesting moment because a lot of Americans are extremely mindful. I have to say that they're very careful not to offend. They come in with messages like, "How should we behave here, not to offend you guys?" And we're just coming and great to visit. And a lot of Chinese respond with equally very, very friendly messages like, "Welcome here," and great to have this direct interaction. So it's a very interesting moment in time. Although I think it will remain a moment in time, to be honest, but we'll get to that in a bit. So this screenshot, this is just, I also opened a Red Note, a Xiaohongshu account. When I heard this, I do mostly Chinese content on Chinese TikTok, on Douyin. But on the Red Note, I do English content. I've just done a video for people who may not have an English interface for Red Note. So which button is what in Chinese for people who don't read Chinese. I'm gonna do one today, I think, about how not to offend and get banned on Red Note. I think it's mostly like, obviously, Chinese history and politics, don't discuss that. Why would you, though? You can discuss that on TikTok and on Instagram and on any US social media if you have to. And the other one is related to like, if you have nothing than your body to attract viewers, then maybe that's not the right app for you.
Yeah, it's not OnlyFans or anything like that.
Exactly, and I've heard OnlyFans was not banned in China. Like, I'm not sure if that's really true and still true, but some people said that you can access OnlyFans without VPN. So if you go for that, you can actually try to reach Chinese that way.
I didn't know that, but I am now going to find out and see. I'm pretty sure it is banned because pornography is banned, and basically
Pornography is banned,
OnlyFans is
yes.
about pornography. So I'm pretty sure it would be. But one of the most interesting aspects of Xiaohongshu, although it doesn't have political content, there's a very strong reason why it doesn't have political content, and that's because no Chinese social media has political content. All political information comes from the State Council Information Office, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It comes from the government. And if I, for example, wanted to, or you, or anyone wanted to put political content onto our Chinese social media, it would just get cancelled. We don't get banned. I mean, you can get banned, but you don't, generally speaking. A couple of years ago, I want to give an example. My wife and I were cycling, and we were in Xinjiang, and we had an interaction with a police officer that was not a good one. Now, I've always praised the situation in Xinjiang. I've been there several times, and I've personally never had a bad experience with police in Xinjiang. But you do interact with them on a daily basis. This is a fact. And there was one day that we were in a place called Shanshan, and it's outside of. It's not far from Urumqi, but halfway between Urumqi and Hami. And we're in this place, and it had a very, very severe protest about 5 or 6 years before we were there. I was actually there a year after the protest, and it wasn't so strict. But they're very strict about foreigners staying in this area. And we'd stopped in a little village outside of the main town, and it had 2 bingguan, which a bingguan is basically a very small, cheap, family-run hotel.
Right.
And we went into the first one and said, can we stay in this hotel? And the lady said, yeah, you can, but I need to get permission from the police first. So we said, okay, that's normal. She phoned the police, and 4 police cars turned up. And most of them were just curious. What are you doing? Why are you on bikes? All that kind of thing. Right. But then their senior officer turned up, and he was one of these big, fat, officious guys. And he basically said to us, you cannot stay here. You have to move to Shanshan proper, which is 30 kilometers away. And we'd already done like 90 kilometers on our bikes.
Yeah, that's the distance, yeah.
And that was the extent of the negativity. I mean, he wasn't rude. He was officious because he was a fat, officious guy. You get those policemen everywhere. But, you know, I've been a police officer. I wasn't officious, but I know plenty who were.
Yeah, there are some, yeah.
Yeah. So it was just kind of following the norm. And my wife wrote about it on her WeChat moments. Okay. And then about an hour later, she said to me, do you know, not a single person has commented on this. And I said, well, let's have a look and see what's going on. And she went in, and it's there on her phone. And I looked on my phone, and it wasn't there.
Okay.
She'd been cancelled. So she could see it, but nobody had said anything to her. She just got it cancelled. And then she asked me to post it. And she sent it to me, and it never arrived. It never arrived. Wow. The posting never arrived. So somewhere in the WeChat system, there is a thing that says, if this is political, if this is critical, it's not going to go. Now, at no stage did she have a problem with this, other than the fact that no one else saw the work that she put in writing this story. You're writing on your phone like this, and you write the story, and there was no photographs. There was no, because I don't think we weren't allowed to take photos. I think it was just a case of we didn't want to. If you're in an interaction with the police, you don't just get your phone out and start taking photos.
Unless you're a certain BBC reporter, you usually wouldn't do that. Exactly. You want to resolve
the BBC pretend that they're doing it from inside of their bags or something like that. Anyway, that was
get their cameras pushed away, so they have the footage.
Well, that's not even by the police. The money shot, as it's called. But anyway, that was the extent of the trouble that Anne got into. Was purely and simply nothing but it got cancelled, and then she put something else out. No problem at all. That went out because you didn't have this controversial thing. So
I want to make a few comments on this because. I don't fully agree that there's no political content. First of all, there's lots of international politics content on Chinese social media.
True.
Those are widely discussed. And also, I don't know the specific situation in your case, and WeChat does have some restrictions. And I wouldn't be surprised if those restrictions are a lot higher in Xinjiang, that they actually have regional scanning of the content. Like they have these AI filters. There's definitely not a person sitting there reading every message that a billion Chinese send on WeChat. So this is all automatic. They have these AI filters for keywords, and she must have typed some keyword that perhaps specifically for Xinjiang at that time was blocked because the authorities were nervous about organized fighting against the police at the time. I say this because I know there's a lot of pictures of a lot of protests from a lot of places in China on social media. And when you see those videos on Twitter or on China hating YouTube channels, 90% of those images come from Chinese social media. So if they weren't on social media, those people wouldn't even get those images. Yes, a very small amount may come from Telegram directly with people who are in contact with them. But that's then obviously the agents who are in contact with China-hating influencers rather than organic protests from the Chinese population. So I want to say there is a lot of political content. The one limitation that's definitely very strict is the leadership discussion, because in the Chinese political system, the leadership isn't discussed by the broad population. What you can comment on are specific topics, though. So again, I don't know, criticizing the police. I've just had this, I don't know if you've seen, Andy Borham did a very interesting experiment by calling the city hotline and complaining about a police car that was parked outside of a parking zone. And the city had the police call him and apologize and admit that they were wrong parking in a place where they're not allowed to park. So you can complain about the police. There are channels for certain topics. So if the police does something illegal, it may not be the best way to go through social media and try to create public outrage. That's kind of the Western way how we change things. In China, there are channels where you report things. And on the other hand, they apparently do work better than in the West. I'm not going to say that they always work, but they do work better than they would in most Western countries, I believe. And so that's that political. And then a personal experience as well. I had a Douyin account before the one that I'm running now. And I did a video on, I think it was Middle Eastern politics, but I had a map where at like the very far corner of the map, there was like a tiny speck of Taiwan island. And because I had taken the map from a Google search, the Taiwan color was different from the mainland China color, and instantly my account got banned. So it wasn't just the video. It was very unfortunate because Douyin has a connection with the Jinri Toutiao, which is a news app also by ByteDance, and I published it, or Sigua, which is like medium length videos. So I published the video there and had it automatically connected to my Douyin account, so it would automatically also publish on Douyin. And Sigua gave me the feedback that the video wasn't okay and that it was blocked. But it still sent out on Douyin, and then Douyin just blocked my account, which was a pity. But now I have a new, even more successful account, so that's fine. But yes, that happened, and that was quite insane because I mean, it was a few pixels in a different color, and
they're very sensitive about that.
So again, it's because it's AI. It's not like some person assessing it. It was just like an automatic thing that just happened.
I want to make one more comment before we move on from the Xiao Hongshu issue, the little red book issue, and that is this. Everybody refers to this legislation that's being tested in the courts in 3 or 4 days' time everyone refers to this legislation as the TikTok ban. I've actually read it. I've read this legislation, and I can assure people in America, if anybody is watching and thinking I'm going to move from TikTok to Xiaohongshu, that it's not going to help them in the long term. Now, you said it is a moment in time, and it is a moment in time. The legislation allowed the government to basically ban anything that they didn't deem suitable. So this is not a TikTok ban. This is a control of all social media outside of US control. So therefore, a control of all social media. And what they're doing here in this ban, if the court proceeds with this TikTok ban, it will give the US Congress and US Senate power to say, Xiaohongshu can be added to that now. And the same day it will be gone. Right. This doesn't have to be tested. Now, what will mean, and in the ban, in the TikTok ban legislation, there are penalties for accessing named apps. So if Xiaohongshu gets named as an app, if you use it, there's a penalty. If you buy a VPN in order to use it, there is a penalty. VPNs are not illegal in the USA, but accessing a nominated banned app is, even by using a VPN. Now, how they police that, I don't know the answer to that. I really don't know how they police it. But the fact is, Xiaohongshu, if this, on the 18th, if the court upholds this decision and says, yes, we're going to ban TikTok, then the simple answer is, it's not about banning TikTok. It's allowing the legislation that gives them the power to ban everything and anything they want, and then ban you from using a VPN to access it. So you're breaking American law wherever you are. If you are, and this is another part of it, it's not for Americans. It's everywhere in the world. You're breaking an American law.
That's insane.
I know.
That's crazy.
Well, the Americans do this.
Think they can make laws for non-American people? I mean, yes, that's insane.
Well, they're currently in, I think it's the Trade Department. One of the Biden administration leadership people has started an inquiry, which of course will get scrapped in a few days' time because of the administration. About the shipping.
Hegemonial aspirations of the Biden administration is off the charts.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's off the charts. Anyway,
I have one question. As you've read this legislation, so is it explicitly that only non-American apps can be banned like this, or is it?
They have control over every app. Every app.
They could even ban Twitter X if they deemed it inappropriate.
It wouldn't be difficult to do, and I'm sure it would fit under the same legislation. Now, I have to go back because I read this several months ago. Fernando and I did a live stream about it, and I'm going back. Oh, it's probably more than a year, and I remember saying, "Well, whatever happens, this will not be." And I remember saying this will not be banned before the election because neither party will want to lose the young followers. And I said the chances are, if this ever goes ahead, it will be during the lame duck period.
Right.
When they can't, they can't blame Trump because he's, that's what I said. And I picked it. And here we are on the 18th, 2 days before the inauguration of the next president. And he'll come into power and say, well, there's nothing I could have done about this. This is the Supreme Court.
Yeah. And that's called democracy, rule of the people.
I'm just making a video about the democracy in its finest hours. Which is a group I'm working on at the moment.
You know, regarding the policing, what I assume may happen is that if you're just some small content creator or just go watching, they will never care and never find you. What they will do is, if you're someone like Jackson Hinkle or like a big voice that they actually fear because you say things that they don't want to have said, then they go after you. I think that's probably how they will do it, because then it will become known that 1 million people follow him on this banned app. And in this comment, TikTok complied with American laws. I was just going to say as well, this law is much, much stricter than the Chinese laws for social media, because in China, and a lot of people have also in recent days made this point on Twitter, in China, the social medias from the US, they're not banned. They're blocked because they refuse to follow Chinese law. They refuse to keep the user data inside of China, which is the same data protection law that the US has for American citizens. And so because they're not complying with the Chinese law, they're blocked. But if you use a VPN and go on Twitter and do nothing illegal, then you're actually fine in China. There is a law that says you're not allowed to use VPN to do illegal things.
Yes.
So it's very explicit. If you go on Twitter and try to do a revolution inside China via the American social media apps, then you're doing something illegal, and then obviously you're illegal and you broke that VPN law. But just going on Twitter or going on YouTube is not illegal in the Chinese law. And so in this way, the American law is much stricter than any Chinese restrictions on social media.
I agree. Yeah. Someone's just asking me, Jerry, are you on Red Note? Xiao Hongshan? No, I am not yet.
Yeah.
But I think
Exactly.
maybe I should be. Based on, I came into YouTube by mistake, or by default rather than by mistake. And I came on Twitter by mistake. I mean, I shouldn't be who I am and what I am, and I find myself a bit of a ring-in. I'm not really where I'm supposed to be. I don't know how this all started. I do know. I started with posting stuff about my bike rides and having people tell me that I'm a liar. And I'm defensive about this. No, I'm not a liar. And you know, I would put things online to prove what I said. You know, you can't ride a bike through Xinjiang. Well, here's a picture of me doing it. And when this started to happen, China Daily picked up on my Twitter account, and China Daily said, "Can we interview you?" And I said, "Sure, yeah." They wrote an article. The China Daily English language newspaper wrote an article about me, and that led me to get very popular inside of China. It boosted my Twitter account from, I think at the time I had about 2,000, and I went up to about 8,000 almost overnight. It was like, wow, it exploded for me. Now I'm over 80,000 on there now. But it was just a strange event. And I only became the kind of geopolitical and political commentator that I am because I was refuting misinformation.
Yeah.
And people would ask me, why do you stand up for China? I don't. I never started standing up for China. Now, I happen to do so because I live here. Like yourself, I see the realities of it. It's a very strange situation, but very, very weird. So I haven't ever gone onto Chinese social media because it's not the market or the audience that I really wanted.
Yes. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, that makes sense. Although now exactly there's this opportunity. And as you already do a lot of great videos, it makes sense to post them on various platforms.
Yeah.
So
if I'm going on the Chinese social media, I will probably, because I don't speak fluent Chinese, I speak what I call functional Chinese.
Right.
You're quite fluent, right?
I would say I'm fluent, and I do my Douyin account in Chinese. And actually, I really want to thank one commenter of your viewers who in our last joint live stream said that I had a good Douyin account, which really encouraged me to do more. And I was amazed that at that time that account was still a lot smaller, and somebody would have seen it and would watch our live stream together. I was very impressed, and it encouraged me to do more. And I've had several videos with more than 1 million views since. So yes, it's been quite a ride on Douyin. And it is, as you say, it's a very different audience. Also, my content is obviously quite different. What I'm trying to tell Chinese is look at the trends. And I think maybe this way we can also segue to our originally planned topic. The whole Red Note issue was just very sudden, and I think it makes sense that we talked about it. I think a lot of Chinese aren't aware of how fast the changes are happening, because a lot of change is slowly building up. And at one point it reaches a tipping point where things happen very fast. And most people are used to watching gradual changes. They're not used to expect such a tipping point. And what I mean by that is, for example, still a lot of Chinese with young children are thinking about how to access an international education. There's still Chinese who travel to the US to give birth there, to have an American passport for their child. I actually know somebody in my vicinity who did that. And I originally did the Douyin video saying, don't do that. If your child is now starting to is starting to go to school, send them to a Chinese education, because in 15 years from now, when they're 18, 20 years old, the Chinese universities will be far advanced over Western.
Let me bring to the screen one of the pictures that you.
Right. Because it's a set of factors, right? It's not just one thing.
We'll come back to
that. Yeah, exactly.
That one. Sorry about the size of this. I have a problem on my computer in that my my note thing isn't working properly. So every time I try and expand a picture, it won't expand. I can't expand it. So I've just put these onto a PPT to get the biggest picture size I can get. So it's a little bit hard to see this, but this is the one I think you're going to refer to now, right?
This is one of them, and it's a very important one. It's the Nature Index of Research Universities. So you can search it. Although I found it very difficult, I have to say, recently Google and Bing are horrible to find relevant information. I have really big problems finding it. So this is the latest that I found from 2022. I know in 2023 and 4 it got even more extreme. What you can see are all the Chinese flags. So what this is the universities with the most scientific papers published in international scientific journals. So it doesn't count if a university has a Chinese journal for a purely Chinese audience. It's really a fair level playing field. They only count international scientific established journals, and they ask how many papers got published in such journals from which university. And so you can see the US has 2, Germany 1, France 1, and the rest of the top 10 are Chinese. And I think the German and French have since dropped out of the top 10. So it's really a dominance of Chinese universities in terms of research papers already now. And then combine that with, think about electric vehicles, where the Chinese just crush the Western markets and crush the Western competition. Well, what do you think if all the companies produce in China? And yes, they at the moment have German designers, Italian designers, Audi, like several famous top designers from Western car brands joined some of these Chinese companies. Yet, at the moment. But in 18 years from now, if this dominance continues, then obviously the world-leading technology, the world-leading science in terms of car design, car technology, everything will be in Chinese universities. So that's what I'm saying is, at the moment, there is still some leading tech in Western universities. But if your child is still young, send them to Chinese education. If you're in the West, have them learn Chinese, because in 15, 18 years from now, that's what they're going to need if they want to have access to the world leading technology. So that was one of my messages.
There was another interesting aspect, and I think it might have been you who raised this, that a lot of companies now are saying, if you have a foreign education, we don't want to employ you. And I think that, was that you who put that on Twitter a couple of days ago?
I do remember seeing that headline for sure, yes. And I think I have commented on it. I don't claim to be the original tweet, but yes, I've seen that headline as well. And I mean, I cannot comment on that. The company that I work for hires from anywhere. They're very merit-based, because it's like they hire a lot of engineers, like tech people, so you can quite easily test the quality of what they do. But I wouldn't be surprised. And another very important point is a lot of Chinese who want to send their children to foreign education say, well, in China, the competition is too high. So the Chinese word is the nejuan, which means like just like a negative internal competition that puts huge pressure on the kids that they must learn so hard. But now here's the thing. The birth rate in China in recent years has gone down a lot. And I personally think it's related to having much more Chinese go to university now, so they have children later. So we're right now in a stretch where the post-80 generation already has had their children, and the post-90s are just coming. But that's another topic. Fact is, at the moment, there are far less Chinese children being born than 10 years ago, 20 years ago. At the same time, as we just seen, there are more and more top world-class universities in China. So it's obvious then in 10, 15 years from now, there will be much more availabilities for Chinese graduates to join Chinese top universities because there's less demand, there's more supply. Obviously, it will be much easier to get in. So again, my message to Chinese viewers, don't worry about Chinese education. Really just make sure your child learns well and you'll be fine, because there will be so much available top education in China. And also society will change. I mean, as China gets richer, there are more options of different professions where you can have a good life. Like, it's not that you have to be, you know, like an investment or you know, like these certain industries where you would get rich and everyone else is just working hard. In 10, 20 years from now, like in Western countries, you can have various professions and have a good life.
Yeah. There's another thing that a lot of people are not commenting on in the West, and that is that MIT is no longer the top technical or science school in the world. It's been taken over by the School of Computing and the School of Sciences in Tsinghua. So Tsinghua has number 1 and 2 in their field globally. And that's not being advertised in the West. They say, oh, no, we can't say that. We can't tell people that. But it really is a problem for the West. They're declining in so many different ways, and that's just one of them.
And that's what I meant with this, when it starts flipping, you know, like China gradually built up all these industries and all these fields of expertise, and step and step and step. And at one point, the car industry has right now this flip. Just within the last 2 years, Chinese cars just became better than Western cars. Let's just put it bluntly. And now that they have become better, well, nothing stops China from continue to scale up, because Chinese can scale very quickly. They have the resources, they have the people. And then it doesn't become like this new kind of competition where Western brands and Chinese brands just keep competing with each other, because now it's just that the Chinese are already better, then they scale up, then they have more profits, then they have more resources to keep researching and improving further, and they will just completely leave the Western brands behind. And this happens in a lot of industries, as you just said. And then if you add that also in the fields of science and education, yes, then the West is in a tough spot. And I'm not hating on the West. You know, some people call me race traitor and whatnot. They say, you're a white guy, why do you support China? Which is an absurd point to make for me. But anyways, I'm not hating on Europe. I'm not hating on the US. I'm making statements that the way things are going, I'm just commenting on trends. The West is not keeping up with China.
Yeah, that's true. The West is not. There's a couple of people commenting on the Little Red Book being the same book that Mao carried around. I actually got 2 copies of this recently, and one of them is in Russian. I can't speak Russian, so if anyone can speak Russian and they want a Little Red Book in Russian, I've got one. I don't know why I ended up with a Russian one, but I have. It's really interesting to read books like that. We're going off topic here, but it's really interesting to read books like that. And I've actually got all of Xi Jinping's books, including the first one when he was the party secretary of Zhejiang, I think, province, or I think it was Zhejiang,
Mhm.
anyway, whatever province he was party secretary of.
Mhm.
And when he wrote that book, Hu Jintao was still in charge, and it was very, very good. You could sort of see the leadership qualities in that. He was obviously
Mhm.
destined for higher things, but he was at the top of the tree in his own province and destined to go higher. Then he became a
Mhm.
Politburo member. It is worth reading what these people said a
Yeah.
long time ago,
Yeah.
and then comparing that with China today,
Yes.
because they were doing it then for what has arrived today. And I think
Yes.
that's something that a lot of people don't realize about China. They are very transparent in what they try and do. They're just not getting the information because they don't know where to go, and the media are not giving it to them. That's a huge problem. The Western media are just not giving the information. Chinese media do, but we don't trust Chinese media. Well, if you don't, then you're doing yourself a disservice, I would suggest.
And honestly, a lot of Chinese media, they are very bad at explaining things. And I know why, because in China, these statements of political leadership in China are very formulaic. They are very fixed in the wording, and you cannot change one word because each word has its very concrete meaning and has been analyzed hundreds and thousands of times. So if you change that one word, it would have a different meaning. And that's why it becomes very, very like stiff to read for non-experts, because it's really an expert language in Chinese politics. It's not like Western populism where you just say things that sound cool, right? And so it becomes very stiff, and the Chinese media, they cannot, because they have to follow the party line, so they cannot just go and use different words to make it easier accessible for us. And so there is like this really deep disconnect between Western people who don't understand the scientific language of Chinese politics, and then the Chinese media and politicians who cannot explain it in open words, because as soon as you use common people's language, obviously you add in your own interpretation, which is great for a YouTube influencer, but it's not okay for the politicians themselves. So it's very challenging. But I agree with you. The huge issue that I see is the media of the West, plus even worse is the China research field, like the whole field of sinology and contemporary China studies. The point, they also have their formulaic language. For example, that you have to say CCP to be taken serious in Western scientific. It's just absurd. It's absurd that you refuse to use the official English translation from the country you're researching. It's like you refer to the populist party instead of the Democratic Party in the US, or whatever words you want to use, just to on purpose use a different name, so to show that you're not listening to them. And then you call yourself an expert. That's just insane. And as you say, like they are super eager to get some inside scoops and some things that nobody says, to claim that that's the truth, what's really happening behind the scenes, this assumption that there's like a huge double structure. And just imagine that you have about 100 million members of the Chinese Communist Party. Now I call it CCP as well, the Communist Party of China, obviously. And you have 100 million members. They all get sent regularly these updates of the official speeches of Xi Jinping and the official documents, the official strategy papers. They have workshops. They have like regular meetings in their companies and in their party offices. They have sometimes retreats where they take 2 days, go to a place and have to study these theory papers. And then you assume that beside all that huge effort to train all the party members in this official theory and this official analysis of the status of China, of the status of the world, of the direction that China should go, and then beside that, you actually also train them in some secret plot that nobody leaks. And 100 million people do not leak that secret plot. But it's somehow everybody is told. And they're told, besides learning all the official things and get tested, there's apps on the phone where you can actually have these self-tests in Communist Party theory. And all the party members have to take these tests regularly. So it's madness, this idea of conspiracy, that it would be possible to have 100 million people shut up about such a huge conspiracy and have the time to do their jobs, to have their families, run after the money they need to survive, plus read all the official theory, and then learn an entire field of a conspiracy without leaking anything. I mean, I hope by explaining it this way, I make it clear why I completely don't believe in this assumption.
No, I'm with you on that. My mother-in-law and father-in-law are in their 80s now. In fact, it's my father-in-law's 80th birthday tomorrow.
Yes.
We're going to a big party. And so she's a year older than him, and he's turning 80 tomorrow. That's his lunar calendar birthday. His real birthday is our calendar birthday, another month away. But anyway, they both members of the party. I didn't find this out until I'd been married several years. I walked up to my mother and father-in-law's house a couple of years ago and said, "What's this? There's a new plaque on the wall. It's a Communist Party plaque." And she said, "Yeah, that's from my mother and father." Why have they got that? Because they're both party members. And this was during one of the anniversaries. And they are the only couple in their region that have been members they're a couple. Both have been members for more than 50 years. So I had no idea that they were members of the party. Right. Not that it made any difference to me, but there was just no reason to tell me this. And my wife said, "You knew that. I told you this years ago." I don't remember. I've been married for 15 years now. And
it's a big honor. It's actually a big honor to be a party member. So people wouldn't hide that. They're actually proud to be members of the Communist Party because...
Yeah, I don't think they hid it.
Exactly.
I think it was just a case they just never had a reason to mention it. I never asked, "Are you members of the party, or what do you think of the party?" It just wasn't part of my conversation. But they still go to meetings quite regularly just to see what's going on. That was the point I wanted to make about that. I'm just going to take this guy out for 5 minutes. There's a guy making rude comments to someone. I'm taking him out for 5 minutes. He just called someone stupid. He just called someone stupid for reading Xi Jinping's book, which is not stupid at all. If you want to know what's going on in China, you should read what they said they're going to do, and then read what they have done. So that guy's just been removed for calling somebody stupid for 5 minutes with a bit of luck.
And I see another comment. Somebody said, "Nejuan is involution." I've also seen this as a translation for that word, but I don't think many English speakers know the word involution. I don't think it's I don't even know where the word comes from in English. so yes, it means, but juan means to circle, and ne means circle inward. So you can imagine it's a spiral that's going inwards, and it gets tighter and tighter at the center. So in the end, it's like this huge pressure. So it's a very graphic way of saying there's too much pressure because of internal competition.
Yeah, I told you my English my Chinese is functional. Ne being internal means I know this one because I have to buy many ne ties and repair many ne ties on my bike rides. So it's always a big problem. I remember once I was in a place called Wuwei, which I think is in Ningxia, might be in Gansu, probably Ningxia. And I was talking to a guy in English, and he didn't have vocabulary for inner tubes. So I used my Chinese on him. I need some ne tie. Oh, he said, okay. And he jumped us into his car and took us to a park called Leitai Park, mishearing my pronunciation. So we had a wonderful walk around this beautiful park, really, really beautiful park in Wuwei called Leitai Park, because all I wanted was inner tubes for my bike. But that's another story. Yeah. Right. Anyway, let's move on to what we came to talk about. Let's put up slide number 1, if people can see this. It's again, I'm sorry about the size; it's a little small. And this is what we came on to talk about: the differences between. We're doing some comparisons between America and China right now. So over to you. What's this about?
Yes. So there's still this statement that the American economy as a whole was bigger than China's, which there is one measure in which that is true, which is the so-called current US dollar GDP. Now, what current US dollar means is that you just take everything bought and sold and add it up and then see what the number is. However, the huge problem obviously is if you get a haircut in China for $15, and that's a really good, with the massage, head massage and everything, haircut, while in the US you pay $60 or $100 for a haircut, then obviously you get more service in China for a smaller amount of money. And that's why this current dollar GDP it has a huge flaw. So the picture that we see here is the PPP GDP, which means purchasing power parity, where they try to adjust the prices so that the number that is measured is not how much people paid for things, but how many things were actually produced. So other example, cars. So instead of asking how much did people in total pay for all the cars, you ask how many cars of the same type were sold in either country. So if the same car costs more in the US than the same car costs in China, you adjust for this price difference to get to PPP. In that measure, the Chinese economy has overtaken the American economy. I think, as you said, it's very small here. I think it was around 2015, 16, 17.
I think it was 17, right? Yeah.
Right. So already in this measure, the Chinese GDP is larger than the US GDP. However, there are more issues because GDP isn't as straightforward as people think, because first of all, you have to assess what is part of the GDP. What kind of expenses do you count? Which ones don't you count? And how do you even access all the information about all transactions that happen in a country? Extreme examples, for example, the UK, a few years back started to add an estimate of drug sales into their GDP, saying that a lot of people generate their incomes by selling drugs illegally, and therefore that's part of the GDP, which obviously is absurd because you have no clue how much money is really exchanged in that way because it's illegal. Obviously, you don't know, and they don't pay taxes on it. So it just gives the government a very cool lever to just say, oh, our GDP actually grew by 3% because we haven't adjusted the drug deals that increased. Or, like, this is an absurd example, but it's really happening in the UK. And China notoriously underreports its GDP. So there are a lot of things, because the Chinese traditionally used a Leninist measure of industrial production rather than the financial capitalist measure of GDP. So they only counted what was physically produced. They've since shifted, when joining the WTO, they've shifted to also measure, all the prices of services, which does make sense, but they haven't included as many types of service as the Western GDP measures. So the real number would be even higher. Thanks, the IRS wants dealers to report their earnings. Good luck with that.
Yeah. I think that's an incredible one. The simplest way to talk about PPP is this: if you give me $100 and put me into New York and say, there you go, enjoy your day, and you give me 100 RMB and you put me in Beijing and say, there you go, enjoy your day, I'll have a much better day in Beijing with my 100 RMB than I would in New York. Now, if I wanted to get a haircut, I'm going to give you some comparisons here. I'm in need of a haircut at the moment. I usually go around the corner here to a guy and he charges 15 RMB normally.
Yeah, right.
Right now, because it's holiday period and he knows that he can rip us off, he's charging 18 RMB.
And for people who don't regularly exchange money, 1 RMB is about 7 RMB is about $1. So if you say
that's what I was just about to say. So he's charging me $2.50 for a haircut.
Yeah.
$2.50 for a haircut. Now,
and
if you give me 100 RMB and $100 and I need to get a haircut, a meal, and spend the night in a hotel, I can do that in Zhongshan. 100 RMB, and it won't be a very nice hotel, I will tell you that, but I can get a hotel around the corner here for 70 RMB, and I can have a haircut and a bowl of noodles. That's good. What can I do with $100 let's say a city? In fact, New York is the only city in America that has more people than the city I'm in now, Zhongshan. And Zhongshan's a very small city. It has 4 million people. So we can use it as a comparison. It's probably not fair as a cost comparison, but we can use it as a population comparison. There's 4 million people living in Zhongshan, and I can spend 100 RMB and get a haircut. I can get a bowl of noodles, and I can get a cheap hotel room. I got a taxi, not a taxi, a Didi car yesterday from the center of Guangzhou to my home. And this was about 6 p.m. It took 90 minutes to travel the 80 kilometers, a little bit of traffic on the Guangzhou side of it. And then it's a freeway all the way. And I had to personally pay the tolls, which were 32 RMB. So $4.50 for the tolls to come 100, nearly 100. It's 87 kilometers, I think, door to door. And the bill was 147 RMB. So 147 RMB to pay this plus 37. So 150 RMB. We're talking about $12 for a 90-minute car ride with a personal driver coming from Guangzhou, from one city to another city, which are 80 to 90 kilometers apart.
Wow.
I don't know how that compares with anywhere in America, but I'm sure you cannot have a car ride in a taxi anywhere in America that's going to cost you that sort of money.
Yeah, and even as a car owner, if you park a car in Shanghai, it's quite expensive compared to most parts of China. If you park a whole day, it will cost you maybe like 10, 15 US dollars, so about 100 RMB. In smaller cities, it's more like 10 RMB. But I know in major US cities, you easily pay 20, 30, 50 US dollars to park your car for a day. So that's, you get the same service, that's the gist of what we're saying. You get the same product in the end, but you pay a very different amount.
Yeah. There's a little car park around. I'm living in a very old building, not the one that you can see behind me, not that old, but a very old building here in Zhongshan, 60 years old. The building and me are about the same age, and we don't have parking here. I don't have a car, so we don't have parking. And what happens here? We have just down the road, there's a public car park, and the locals who have a car can rent a place in there. You can't buy. You can rent a place in there. And one of my friends came to visit with their car, and I said, park in there. It's quite cheap. And they were shocked because it cost 30 RMB to park there all day. 30 RMB is $4. And they were shocked, really shocked. And I said, I'm really sorry. I didn't realize it was that expensive.
Right.
Because just around the corner, there's a shopping center. And if they park there for 4 hours or 5 hours, it'll cost 3 or 4 RMB. So it cost 50 cents to park there. And they paid 30 RMB, $4 to park for 3 or 4 hours while they came here, had a meal. This is another thing, had a bottle of wine, and then using the app called one of these motorcycle drivers. They come with a fold-away electric bike that they put in your boot, drive you home, and then get on their electric bike and go away. And that cost them a further 60 RMB or something. It's
a bit more expensive than a taxi, but it's a very good service for safety, that when you're drunk, you can call a driver to drive you home in your own car. Yes, that's a very good one. Do you want to look at a few more of the statistics before? I know you have to leave in a few minutes.
We've got a little bit of time. Hang on one second. It says most restaurants have free parking, and that's true. So does a shopping center. Derek, thank you for that.
Right. So now we've looked at the GDP overall. If we look at industry, which I think is very important because these are actual products manufactured. Now, okay, some people tell me hardware doesn't matter anymore. It's all about AI nowadays. And yes, all these things, they do matter. But in the end, if you don't have the hardware, if you don't have the products, you're not going to live in a house. You're not going to have a phone. In the end, humans still live in a physical world. So the physical products do matter. And once you don't have them anymore, you realize that they do matter. In industry, the Chinese economy is now almost double the size of the US. So it's been progressing in leaps and bounds. Why doesn't it progress steadily, but has like these steps up? I think this has probably to do, again, because it's measured in US dollars. So that means the fluctuation in exchange rates sometimes makes it look like the Chinese industry is going down, even though it was actually continuously growing. but just because the exchange rate sometimes went up and down, it doesn't look as smooth as it is. But the fact is, even at the moment when the Chinese yuan is again rather soft, rather cheap compared to the US dollars, the Chinese industry is almost double of what the US industry is. And this shows how really the Chinese economy is a lot bigger than the US economy overall. Because what's in the US GDP that makes it look so big? There is the stock market, which is insanely overvalued. There's a huge bubble in the US stock market because the Fed, the central bank of the US, kept pumping money into the financial institutions, which use that money to buy bonds and stocks, thereby pushing up the stock prices without any real economy behind these high stock prices. And that makes the GDP of the US look big, but there's nothing that's actually produced. But if we look only at the industry, the whole financial sector is excluded. And that's where we see how much bigger the Chinese economy is. I don't think we have the graphs here, but if you look at specific production, for example, steel production, it's even more extreme. I think China now produces more than half the steel worldwide.
Yes, China's steel production is 70% of the world.
Incredible.
And shipping production is similar as well.
Shipping,
like more
drones,
than half of the world.
And more and more, and see, and wait till 2030, and let's see what the car industry looks like. And the thing is, it's not even, it's not even absurd and crazy, because if you think about it, China has more people than Europe and the US combined. So it does not make sense that, Europe 1/3, the US 1/3, and China 1/3. It does make sense that China produces more of anything than Europe and the US combined. That would be kind of a back to normal situation.
I made a video yesterday based on facts, statistics with Guangdong Television. I was invited to Guangdong Television, and it'll be on Jerry's Take on China. But they make it for themselves, and they allow me to. They'll edit and send me a copy. So this is quite a nice little arrangement that I have with Guangdong Television sometimes, just working together with an official media. And you can see when they've made one for me, you can see it's a little more propaganda-ish. But I write the script; it's my script, not theirs, and they've never asked me to change anything. But one of the things I was researching for this, they asked me to talk about the 2024 figures. And I found the US Bureau of Census on uscensus.gov. They have the figures for all of the trade between America and China for the last 18 years. I only went back 2 years, 2024, 2023. December 2024 wasn't there. Now, the information from China is now available. It came out yesterday. And sales to America were up in December, considerably up, like 140 billion or something like that for 1 month. And they're normally about 130 billion, 111 billion or 110, something like that. And so they were up. Now, what this statistic showed me was really surprising to me, because over the last 2 years, on a month-by-month comparison, and I've got the screenshots to put into the video. So on a month-by-month comparison, excluding December of last year, just last month, because it wasn't available when I did the screenshots, China and America are selling almost exactly the same as they did a year ago, just a little bit more than 2 years ago. So trade with America, there is a trade war going on, but it's more going on in the media than in reality. Trade with America is still high. What's happening with China is that trade with diversified markets is higher, and that's why manufacturing is up. They've got more of a domestic market as well, and that's why manufacturing is up. So this has got nothing at all to do with any overcapacity that the Americans want to present to us as some kind of flaw in China's system. This is a reality that China is still exporting equally as much to America as they were 1 year ago and 2 years ago. Now, that will probably change next month, and that's why December's was so high. December was so high because a lot of people placed orders in November when Trump was elected. They said, get these orders in only if you can deliver before the 20th of January. So a lot of sales were made in December, and that will be reflected in this year's figures. In January of this year, the figures will probably go down because they'll say, you can't, there'll be a lot of hesitancy about getting anything imported into America after the 20th of January because of tariffs.
Yeah. Yeah. And somebody commented to be surprised that Marxism is popular in Western universities again. I mean, you've touched upon a lot of topics where I think it will make sense to talk a lot in depth about Marxism and how, you know, it focuses on building up capacity rather than on maximizing the profit of the sales, which China is doing. Therefore, the prices in China go down. The West cries deflation, horrible. But we living in China, we actually really enjoy that the prices don't go up. And there is one critical point, though. A lot of people in Western countries do say Marxism, but they don't necessarily mean the same thing, because Marx wrote a lot of things. And in the 150, 170 years since he wrote, a lot of other people have written a lot of things in his name as well. So there's a lot of different things that are nowadays called Marxism. But yes, I agree, there is a trend to look at Marxist economy again. And I think it's very important and very useful.
Yeah. I agree. So as we move on to the next slide.
Yep. This one, and I think there's another one, which is the Gini index. This one has really surprised me, because I knew like China had this huge success of ending absolute poverty. And I always keep emphasizing, yes, it's absolute poverty, which is an international like line of poverty of saying below, I think it's $2.15 US now. It's defined by the World Bank, and it's adjusted again for the price level of each country. And it's used across the board in African countries, in Asian countries, in Western countries as well, to just say, if you're below that, then you really lack the basic necessities. And China has ended this form of poverty. What I didn't know is that the US doesn't just have relative poverty of people who cannot afford the expensive lifestyle in the US, but they actually do have still a relevant percentage of people who live in extreme poverty.
It's increasing too.
Yeah,
it was during COVID, it increased, but it's been increasing since before the COVID pandemic, and it's now it's over 12%. It's approaching 13%. So more than 1 in 10 people in America live in abject poverty. They don't know, they have food insecurity. They don't know where their next meal is coming from. Right. The number of people who are homeless has increased in the United States, and it's now above 700,000 people who are homeless. But in that, they do not count people who have a car or a trailer or a camper van to live in.
Really?
So that's a different classification, which is called vehicular residents. So people who live in a vehicle are not counted as homeless. So 700,000 people live on the streets or in tents. And there's another number, which is, I don't know what the number is. And it's probably equally as much as people living in tents that are now living in.
I assume a lot more, actually, because if you have to sell your house, you definitely want to hold on to your car if anyhow possible. So, wow, that's insane. Crazy.
It is, in a country that I mean, they talk about their stock market and say, look, the stock market, and this is one of Trump's
is doing well.
Look how good the economy is. The stock market has increased every month since I've been president, and that's how he'll measure it. But 90% of Americans aren't on the stock market.
Yes, and it's both parties, by the way. Also, Biden and Democrat followers keep saying, well, Biden's economy was really good. The economy is doing well. And it's not. It's not for the poor people in the US at all.
No. And there are more and more poor people. Let's have a look at that Gini coefficient, because that was a very interesting one. Is this the one?
No, this is, but we can keep that one as well for a second. It's just the life expectancy, and people may have seen it because it was quite a big headline that the life expectancy of China has now overtaken the life expectancy of the US. And some blame COVID measures, some blame COVID itself. I'm not going to even enter that discussion. But fact is that the life expectancy in China has continued to rise while the one in the US is going down. And besides COVID and COVID measures, I think another one is fentanyl and all these drugs issues that the US have. So I mean, this is in the end the most important single number you can look at, in my view, is life expectancy. If you
it's not just your view. I've had John Ross, the economist, on this channel, and
he's the one where I'm taking this from. Yes, he's in my view one of the best economists in the world to read. He's absolutely brilliant. Yes,
I agree.
And because what's the economy for if not to make life better? And if your life gets better, you tend, in average, to live longer. And yes, there are examples, of course, of people who get old, but in a horrible condition. They don't live well. But generally, if you don't live well, if you're unhealthy, you're not going to get as old as if you're healthy. So obviously, in life expectancy, overall, it's the one single number that has the most power of explanation.
Because it has a great deal of relevance in education, environment, and in your own health. So your health system needs to be good, and China's health system is improving constantly. I've been a victim of the health system quite recently. I know that it's okay, and I know that it's better than it used to be. So I'm very happy with the way that's going personally now. So your education, you need a good education in order to say, I know how to look after myself. And you need good sanitation, good environment. If you don't have those three factors, a health system, an education system, and an environmental system that is good for you, you aren't going to get life expectancy improvements. So those things, John points this out as the most important factor in any history of any country. Lifting people out of poverty is great. That was a momentous moment when they declared that they'd done this, and they'd done it 10 years early. But it's still, as you rightly pointed out, left a lot of poor people. There are still a lot of poor people in China. There's no question about that. If you travel across China, you will see poor people. There is no question. But they're not homeless. They're not in poverty. They're not worried about food security. They are out of that situation. And that's the important thing, I think. Someone's just made this. This is a really harsh comment, I think. American tents use materials made in China. So does the American flag.
I was just going to say, where do you think the MAGA hats are made at the Trump rallies?
Yes, exactly.
I also want to comment a bit about this discussion about is China socialist or not. I think, yes, China is very much socialist. And I think so because the Communist Party, which leads the country, uses Marxist theory and socialist analysis to assess the world and responds to this socialist theory. So it's a very much socialist country. And it's also self-declared socialist. So in the self-perception of the Communist Party. And as you said, read the books of Xi Jinping. He doesn't tire to point out China is socialism and not any other isms. And we have a very clear the path of China, Dao Lu in Chinese, and an experience in the past. And that's how our socialism has progressed. And read Marx. That's statements by Xi Jinping. So he forces young party members to read Marx. So
this is a good comment. Yes. China is a hybrid economy. This is what they talk about with the Chinese with socialist socialists with Chinese characteristics. And that's very much a point where they say, well, we need to have some degree of capitalism, but it's controlled by the Chinese government.
But look, this is what Deng Xiaoping said. Capitalism has planned elements in its economy. There's no capitalist country that has no planned economy. So why can socialism not have any market economies aspects? So it's still socialism, even though it has some parts of market economy. I know it's a bit off topic, but I find it important to know the theory of Chinese leadership. And Deng Xiaoping never said, let's add some capitalism to China. He said, let's add some elements to the economy in order to get rich and have the prosperity for all.
Yeah. There's a very interesting book written by a former Australian Prime Minister called Kevin Rudd about Xi Jinping. You can read the entire book, and the one thing that you come away with, and it's a shock, horror expose, Xi Jinping is a Marxist. Oh my God. That's basically what the book tells us. A lot of stories in the book, but Xi Jinping is a Marxist.
Yes, and the Chinese characteristics really is just that Marx already in his original theory said that socialism depends on the stage of development of a country. And that includes culture. I think Marx wasn't aware enough of the differences of cultures between non-European countries. But even he realized that different countries have different stages of development. And already Mao said, well, we're not at the stage of Russia when they did the Soviet revolution. So our revolution must be different. We must work with the impoverished farmers, not with the factory workers, because we don't have enough factory workers in China. So yes, there's always this Chinese characteristics element because China has a different culture, it has a different economic background, it has a different stage of development, so it cannot copy other socialist countries. But socialism isn't a one way fits all simple, application. You just put it on top of a country and then everything works the socialist way. Socialism is a constant struggle to improve situation.
It should be. And this is an important point. It's not about maximum profit chasing.
Yes.
Now, I was on the high-speed train, not yesterday, the day before. What was it? Yeah, it was the day before yesterday, coming back from Beijing. And I was surprised. Beijing train station wasn't as packed as I expected it to be, but it was a pretty busy train station. There's a lot of people traveling around at the moment. It's not even New Year yet. So starting at the end of this week, there will be a massive, they're putting on 100 extra trains a day, and they will make a fortune. But it's not about that. The train system, a lot of people are critical. Oh, look, they built this train system and it's not cost effective. Well, I'll tell you that the main routes are very cost effective. Every seat on those trains is full.
Yeah, nor do they have to be, exactly. I mean, that's the point. They
doesn't have to be.
Provide a service for the economy overall, and that's far more important than the direct profits of the railway lines. And I keep saying, it's not even a joke. If China really cared about GDP numbers, they could instantly increase the GDP number by raising the cost of insulin to American levels, which is, I think, about 1,000 times more expensive than insulin in China. And because if you need insulin, you need it, no matter how much it costs. So they could just raise the price. It costs more, GDP goes up.
I'm glad you raised that. I'm going to tell another story here. A lot of people who follow me know that I found myself in hospital back in October with thrombosis. I was a very, very serious. My calf, I thought I had ruptured my calf muscle or strained my calf muscle, and my calf swelled up to 56 centimeters around. And when I went to the hospital, they measured it. My calf was 56, half a meter around my calf muscle. And that was a pretty serious situation. So they started me on an immediate course of these blood thinners to improve that situation. They told me they couldn't operate. It was too serious. They can operate on minor thrombosis, but they can't operate on a very serious one. So I was given this urgent course of treatment and 5 days in hospital. They told me 10 at the beginning, but it was only 5. Now, every month I have to go back to the hospital to have a check. There's no problems with the calf. It's all fine now. Thank you very much for asking, everyone. Yes, I'm fine, before you all ask. But it's all okay and under control. But I still have to keep the blood thinners going for between 3 and 6 months. And I went back just a few days ago to get this month's supply of medications. And the doctor said to me, are you okay if I give you Chinese medicine? It's the same medicine.
Right.
And it's made in the same factory as the American one. Now, the American medicine is made in China, shipped to America, and then exported from America to China so as I can pay 770 RMB for 1 month's supply. 770 RMB for 1 month's supply. Now, I thought that was pretty reasonable. That's basically $110 for a month's supply of my medicine. And it's American medicine. So I thought, that's all right. I'm okay with that. Then he said to me, do you want to take a Chinese medicine? It will be a bit cheaper. And I said, sure, I have no problems with that. I went to the paying window to pay. I've got 2 months supply of medicine. I'm going to let you guess. How much do you think my 2 months supply of the Chinese-made medicine cost?
I have no idea. I really cannot tell.
64 RMB.
Wow. Less than 10%. Wow, that's insane.
For 2 months, it's basically 5% of the cost.
Less than 5%. That's insane. Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly the point that we talked about before about the PPP, GDP. There is an adjustment in this PPP calculation, but it's notoriously insufficient, this adjustment, because it's just too many points where there's a big difference.
It's definitely the ripoff.
Yeah, it is a great ripoff. And I just saw another great comment before about by Syncmaster, China socialism is not a nanny state socialism. Yes, it isn't. And this whole idea of nanny state socialism is actually not a Marxist idea. That is the classical social democrat, we call it in Europe. And there's a big difference between socialist or communist versus the social democrats. And the social democrats, or in the US called democratic socialists, what they want to do is make capitalism more bearable for the working class. So they add this layer of nanny state. Yes, you get exploited as a worker, but we somehow give you some benefits and we make you feel better while you get exploited. And this has worked well during the Cold War because there was this pressure from the Soviet Union where workers would always say, like, okay, if you don't give us better support, then we're going to just flip to the communist side and we have the communists in our back if we do that. So they could put a lot of pressure on companies and on the state. But after the Soviet Union collapsed, this model really showed that it's charity, and charity doesn't work because it doesn't empower the workers in the end. Yeah. So I'm very much opposed to this idea of this nanny state socialism.
Yeah, me too. This is a good comment, I think, because I've been actively involved in this, making videos with, again, Guangdong Television. I was picked as the host because, believe it or not, and you may be watching now, the deputy party secretary of the Guangdong People's Congress, the National People's Congress in Guangdong, the Provincial People's Congress, the deputy secretary of that is a follower of my YouTube account.
No way! Wow.
Yeah. I was I met him and he said, oh, I'm so pleased to meet you. I'm like, whoa, really? Why? So I'm a follower.
Likewise, right? Amazing. Wow.
Yeah. And he personally picked me to make this video with Guangdong Television. So I've made 6 episodes over 2 years. So there was a really interesting aspect of 6 episodes over the last 2 years about what I call the Chinese. I have to say this because I am supported by Chinese media in this respect. The Chinese call it whole process people's democracy. Yeah. And I prefer collaborative governance. It really does work very, very well because the government works with the people. And take a look at what Andy Borum did. I haven't seen that one, but Andy Borum, I saw Andy Borum's complaint about these police cars parked on the zebra crossing, or zebra crossing, or pedestrian crossing, whatever you like to call it. But Andy complained about that on Twitter, and then he called 12345 in his local municipality, and they fixed it, and he got an apology. He got an apology from the police. So that's how we work together. Yeah, that's how it works.
And there is one more aspect. So yes, the talking to the government, I think basically that's actually democracy. That's like the true meaning of
it is. The reason I don't like them calling it democracy is because so many people in the West think one vote, that's democracy.
Exactly. It's not. And then there's one more aspect to communism that I find very important, and it's the rule by the working class and for the working class. And for a while in the West, we didn't need to think about this because capitalism also made the workers rich and everybody was happy. But right now we're seeing in the US what it means if the elites, if the government works for the capitalist class and not for the working class. So as we've said, the stock market is doing well, investors are getting richer and richer. But the working people are suffering. The middle class is disappearing. The poor are in a really bad situation, and they see no way out. And that's not something that, it's not a mistake. It's a feature of the American capitalist system. Yes, the US elites own the government, and in China, the government owns the elites. I think that's it's a perfect statement, because in China, you can act and work as a capitalist, but at one point, if you get rich, you would start to get powerful. And at that point, the Communist Party comes in and puts checks and balances on you. And I think that's very important.
Yep, and this is from the same person. The Chinese government is much more I've made a video about this exact topic, and I think it was called this. If you think you live in democracy, have a look at China, or something like that. Yeah. What your last statement just led me into was asking about, and for some reason I haven't copied over the picture of the Gini coefficient. So let's talk about, without showing the picture, what is and how does this accurately reflect what's going on, the Gini coefficient?
Right, I thought I saw it before, but anyway, yes. So the Gini coefficient is a measure of, let's maybe go through. There's not this one.
That's the first second.
Not this one, not this one, not this one. Maybe go on.
No, that's all the pictures I have.
All right, then it's not here. I thought I had seen it. Anyway,
I thought I'd seen it as well.
Right? Maybe. Anyway, so the Gini coefficient is a measure of inequality between the richest and the poorest people, and how many people belong to the richest and the poorest groups. And it's a bit a complex calculation, but it's sufficient to know that if the higher it is, the more unequal a society is. If it would approach 100% or 1, that means that all the wealth is in the hand of one person. And if it's 0, that means that everybody has exactly the same amount. Or like if it approaches 0, I don't think it can go to 0. No, but it's typically between like 30 and 50%, or like 0.3 to 0.5. If it's above 0.4, then it means there's a lot of inequality. And there have been studies that say if it increases above like 0.42, 0.45, or 45%, then it starts to threaten the society to become unstable. Whereas 30 was like the very egalitarian period, for example, in Maoist China, like during Mao's time, where most people were really very equal. And China has become very unequal after Deng Xiaoping's reforms, which is exactly what Deng said. Let some people get rich first so they can drive the country forward, and then bring the rest of the people along to reach common prosperity. And Xi Jinping now in 2017 said, all right, the first phase of Deng's plan has been achieved. Some people in China are very rich. China is world leading in an increasing number of industries. Now it's time for the rich to bring the rest of the people along so everybody can reach this shared common prosperity. And the Gini coefficient has been decreasing dramatically in China. So it's been higher than the US, or as high as the US for a while. And it's now gone down a lot, meaning China has become a lot more equal in terms of how much people earn and own.
While you were talking about it, I was just looking at another computer, and I've pulled up the figures here, which unfortunately on another computer, so I can't show them. But the Gini coefficient for China now is this was in 2022, is 37.1, which is not a bad Gini coefficient. It's within the parameters of where it ought to be. And this is 2022. USA's is 39.8, so it's a little higher. Now, what has happened in the last year to 2 years, I know for a fact, is that in America, it's widened a little bit, and in China, it shrunk a little bit. So the picture that we had before, which I don't see now, And I've got a problem with this computer and pictures. It's really
I'll
struggling.
put it on Twitter in a moment.
Yeah, it'll go on to Twitter. So let me also while we do this, I'll put a banner
I
up
have
there.
a hard stop at 11, so in 3 minutes I may
Hard
have
stop
to
at 11.
leave.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Very soon.
you can find Harold on Twitter on Harold in China, or Houthi Harold, which is a great name.
My homage to the people who really fight against genocide. Yes. Oh, sorry for saying that word. I hope it doesn't wreck your channel.
Oh, it doesn't matter. It's not important to me the monetization. In fact, I had Ben Norton on here, and he was afraid to say it. I said, "Don't worry, I'm not monetized." But I wasn't at that time. So anyway, the Gini coefficient has improved in China, and it is declining, or it's going the opposite way in America right now. So the figures I've got here from 2022 had both of them within a decent parameter, and now we're kind of stretching on America and shrinking on China. So it's a good thing. So you have a hard stop. That's okay. I think we only plan to do an hour or so here, and I'm okay for time now. I had something planned today, but it's been cancelled. So I'm lucky. But I want to thank you for coming on and talking about this and demonstrating yet another of your wonderful shirts.
Thanks. Yes. So yeah, we had maybe a bit unstructured discussions because we had so many topics, but it's great talking to you as always. Yeah. And thanks to everyone for the great comments.
We should do it again. Yeah, thank you very much for the people who made the super chats and the donations there. Thank you. And thanks everyone for the comments. Thanks for joining us, because Harold really does have to get out of the building now. You're off work today, right?
I'm on paternity leave starting today. I'm leaving for Switzerland tomorrow.
Oh, paternity leave. That's nice.
Yes.
Imagine having that.
10 days, just so people would know. Men get 10 days off, and women
10 days paternity leave in China. Is that for all men?
I think it's by law, yes, and it depends on the provinces. Other places have more, to 14 days or even 30 days, I think. And for women, it's 5 to 7 months after each child.
Yeah, and they also get an extra 14 days for every additional child. So if they have twins, they get more. And if they have triplets, even more still. And it's all paid. Yeah, it's all covered and paid. All right, well, yeah, let's leave it on that happy note. A little surprise there. I didn't know that you're on paternity leave. Congratulations.
Yes, thanks. And for that comment, everything's perfect in China. Maybe we should do a talk about problems in China next time. Why not?
Yeah, I try and avoid, but let's do that in about a month's time when you're back from Switzerland. Let's get together and talk about the problems in China.
And we're not going to talk about the BBC stories; they're worthless. I meant, like actual topics that Chinese care about. So I
made a short video about what tourists don't like in China. A couple of
no, I don't care about those, and I have to leave. I care more about what Chinese don't like. Anyway, thank you very much, and talk to you soon. Anyone in the comments, please comment on my Twitter if you.
Yeah, if there's any questions for Harold, go to his Twitter stream. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. We